Welcome to Terror at Collinwood. I can't wait for you to hear today's episode featuring Nick Caputo and our conversation and celebration of supporting characters in Dark Shadows. So many wonderful minor characters in the show or supporting characters in the show who added so much, and Nick added so much to this episode of the podcast. It was really fun talking to him. Before we get to that, I want to let you know that Johnny D and the Moonlighters, the band that performs the opening theme to the podcast, the surf rock cover of Robert Cobert's Dark Shadows theme, a surf rock version that you might hear at the Blue Whale on the jukebox. Johnny D and the Moonlighters did that. They have a Facebook page, and I encourage you to go like that Facebook page if you are on Facebook. I will put a link to the Facebook page in the show notes. Johnny D and the Moonlighters did such a sensational job on the theme song. So if you enjoyed it, I hope you will go tell Johnny D how much you enjoyed it on their Facebook page. So check it out. There are spoilers here for those who listen. Welcome to Terror at Collinwood. I am your hostess, Danielle, aka Penny Dreadful, and I am thrilled to have my guest here today. I am joined by Nick Caputo, who is a writer and blogger, an expert on the legendary Steve Ditko, co-creator of Spider-Man and creator of Doctor Strange. Nick has written for 75 Years of Marvel from publications such as The Golden Age to the Silver Screen and the Stan Lee story published by Taschen Books. Nick wrote captions, biographies, provided research for the 1960s and early 1970s period, and was an editorial consultant. His articles and essays have appeared in Alter Ego, Jack Kirby Collector, Ditko Mania, Comic Book Artist, Comic Book Marketplace, Jack Kirby Quarterly, Robin Snyder, and Fantical Publications, and Marvel's Omnibus and Masterworks collections. He also wrote a great piece on Jonathan Frid and Dark Shadows on his blog, and you can find him at nick-caputo.blogspot.com. And welcome to the show, Nick.
Well, thank you, Danielle. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's great having you here. Finally, we've corresponded quite a bit over the last couple of years. You know, we've written back and forth over email, and gosh, it's been almost a year since you suggested a great topic for an episode, which was supporting characters in Dark Shadows. There's so many. I mean, so many of the key players are so memorable and beloved to this day, but also Dark Shadows often featured these great supporting characters who would maybe be on for 3 episodes, 5 episodes, and were also so memorable and left a great impression, great actors. And it was such a great topic that I asked you to join me for the show. But it's been so long, so I do apologize for taking
That was
so
very
long.
kind of you. No, in my comic book work, research, I always like to dig into the things that don't get as much attention. So that's kind of my forte, you know, instead of just even though I talk about Steve Ditko, who's well known, I used to usually go into his more obscure work, you know, not just talking about Spider-Man or Doctor Strange. He did so much other things.
Yeah.
And he did a lot of mystery and fantasy and science fiction work. And I like to delve into that more. And I do that with most of the comic book research that I do.
Yeah. And I was listening to you on another podcast, and they were talking about Steve Ditko, and you were offering a lot of great insights, and you were friendly with him, like you corresponded with him on a regular basis, didn't you?
Yes, within the last like 10 years or so, before he passed, I started to write to him. You know, eventually, I know he didn't do, he didn't take phone calls. He didn't want to be bothered in that way, but he wrote back to everybody that wrote to him. That was just as he was a person of letters, you know. Enjoy that aspect. If you wrote him, even if it was something silly, he would answer you back. He just felt it was the thing to do. And yeah, we had write him about 2 weeks later. I get a letter back, usually 2 or 3 pages, handwritten.
Wow.
And I wrote by hand too, the same way, back and forth. And it was great,
Yeah.
And you didn't push the guy, you got a lot more out of him, and, we respected him and discussed his work instead of
Mhm.
talking about his personal business, which was not something he wanted.
Yeah.
And I respected that. A lot of fans didn't. They just wrote to him and asked for things, original artwork, signatures, all of
Yeah.
that. And I didn't go in that direction. So
Yeah.
no, I was pleased to do that. And that podcast was fun. Yeah. Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, and Dark Shadows, I think, shares a kinship with comics in a lot of ways. Just sort of I don't know, in the serialized narrative and just I think because it's a horror fantasy kind of
Oh,
show, it has that.
100%, Danielle. I was
Yeah.
taking some notes before and telling one of my friends about it because he didn't follow the show, but he's
Mhm.
into comics. And I said, as a kid, and I think one of your guests mentioned it, or the that other podcast that just started, which is really good.
Oh yeah, Alan's podcast. I
It was
just had
really
him
good,
on.
really
Yeah,
detailed.
Collinsport After Dark. Yeah,
Yeah, I love that.
yeah,
Uh,
he's great. Yeah.
I forget who mentioned it, but they were comics fans too, and they said it's such a connection. As a kid, read mostly Marvel comics, me and my older brother John, and and watched Dark Shadows almost every day, and the connection is there. They were both serialized. Almost every Marvel comic was continued next month. There were cliffhangers, literally.
Yeah.
Sometimes in Dark Shadows, there were literal cliffhangers too.
Yeah.
Uh, and you had the interaction of the characters. You had the fantasy. You had time travel. You had imagination. Fantastic Four would travel to different worlds, and it
Yeah.
was just there was a lot of connections between that and the creative people that produced Dark Shadow. So I think that appealed to me very much, still does,
Yeah.
and I think that was the connection. A lot of people enjoy the comics and sort of that. Of course, we had all the famous monsters and all the other books. Anything
Sure.
with Dark Shadows in it, we purchased if we could. I bought the gum
Absolutely.
cards. I
Yeah.
was just talking about the gum cards. And unfortunately, I didn't keep them all. I was
Mhm.
telling them the story of me and my friends used to go buy them and collect them all, and they were a nickel each, whatever they were back then. And we went to one of our local candy stores and we bought the last packs. And my friend Joe goes, "Why don't you ask them for the box?" And I go, "Yeah, okay, and what are they going to do? They throw it out." So I took the box. I had it for a long time, lost it in traveling and
Uh,
moving. And I'm like, could you know how much that's worth?
yeah.
It was so rare. That was garbage.
Those boxes go for big bucks now. Yeah.
But I had it one time,
Yeah. There are
So
reproductions out there which look great, but it's nice to have the original if you
there
can.
are. I have some of the original cars that I picked up at the conventions here and there, but don't
Yeah.
have them all.
Yeah, my uncle gave me all that was my actually the first visual of Dark Shadows I had in the
Wow.
70s was mid 70s. My uncle Valdemar gave me his gum cards and
Mhm.
his famous monsters 59, which I remember with the Basil Gogos cover. Those were
Yep.
that was like the first, and he would tell me all the stories about Dark Shadows and stuff, but
Wow.
those cards I kept them for years, but my mother threw them away.
Uh,
He gave me his Lost in Dark Shadows, Lost in Space, the
right.
Monkey, lots of
Oh, I
really
buy
cool.
them all. Yeah. I
Yeah,
bought the
and I
monkey cards
yeah, and I would
and
buy
all
the
this.
ones
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
in the 70s too. I would buy all the ones that were coming out then too, like the Incredible Hulk and geez, Charlie's Angels, Star Wars,
Yeah.
and I just had them all. I had all those cards, and my mother threw them out, but I recollected them over the years. I was able to get a complete set of the Dark Shadows cards. Um, just quickly going back to comics and that kinship, there are a lot of comics creators who are fans of Dark Shadows too, and were at the time and still are, like Don Glut, who was
Mhm.
legendary writer. I've had him on the podcast, but Richard Howell too, who's
Right.
a very well-known Dark Shadows fan and did some very prominent comics work, and would throw in references to Dark Shadows. And even I don't know if Stan Lee was a Dark Shadows
He
fan.
was aware of it. I don't think he probably didn't follow anything,
Yeah,
but
he
he
did for a
knew popular
reference.
culture.
Yeah, you mentioned in your blog, how Stan Lee threw in a reference to Barnabas in an
Yeah.
issue of Fantastic Four in 1970.
Yeah. He was really up to date he knew what was going on. So he had an eye for that, but I'm
Yeah.
sure he didn't follow. But Roy Thomas, who was the writer editor at Marvel,
Hmm.
and wrote most of the comics that Stan was writing in the 60s, he definitely was a Dark Shadows fan. He told us in conventions and in interviews that he worked at home a couple of days a week. He was freelance. Uh, whenever he was home, he'd take the phone off the hook so he could watch the show. Literally for that half hour, everything stopped. So he would be a great guest to have on here.
He's yeah, I think he was
talk
on
about Dark Shadows.
He did didn't he do the Darn Shadows spoof?
Oh, he did the Darn Shadows.
Yeah,
He was also he wrote Doctor Strange for many years. So
created Morbius. I think he was on the Collinsport Historical Society podcast in one of their episodes a while back, years ago.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, but I remember the Darn Shadows spoof where they tried to do their...
That was great, yeah.
That was great,
Severin drew that. That was really, really great. I remember that cover when it came out. That was just, wow, he was on it. We were in this issue. You know, this is great. The Mod Squad and Dark Shadows.
Yeah, my favorite panel in that is Barnabas holding this giant book and he's trying to come up with ideas to get the ratings up, and it just says, 101 horror plots or plagiarism for fun and profit.
That's great. Yeah. That was really good. But no, he loved the show, and that's how we followed it. Back then, you couldn't tape it, the videotape. Today you could you have all these options. Back then, if you missed it, that was it. As my brother was a running joke now, because I watched the show almost every day. But sometimes there was some dull episodes or whatever, and I have the latest issue of the Hulk. I want to read them, and he's sitting there yelling at me. He's like, "Put the book down." He says, "You'll always have the comic. You'll never see this again."
Yeah.
Like, well, you were wrong there.
Little did he know. It took a while, but it finally came. Did you? So how did you first discover Dark Shadows? How did you get into it?
Well, thanks to my cousin Marianne, she knew my brother was into all horror related stuff and monster movies and everything, and I guess she took notice of it first. She told us there's this show with a vampire on, and and he started watching it. I'm younger than him. I started following him, watching it. I don't know exactly when I started. I think it was probably during the 1795 period. I do recall some things are just vivid. The two vivid memories I have that I could say definitely from the original show was when Trask was walled up. Mm-hmm. That had an effect on you, obviously. And when Barnabas got into the accident and he goes into the hospital and Dr. Lang says, where are you? And he says, "Where am I?" And he says, "What time is it?" And he says, "It's 3:00 or 3:30 in the afternoon." And he opens up the blinds.
Yes.
Like starts screaming. I remember that visually, So those are so around that. And then we started following it constantly,
Yeah. And your friends were watching it as well?
Quite a few. Not everybody, but a lot. Most of my friends were watching the show. You grew been into it as much as me. My brother, like I said, followed it. Yeah. And it was huge, just a huge phenomenon.
You grew up in New York, right?
Brooklyn, yep. In
Brooklyn. Did you ever get to go to the studio when they were taping?
Didn't go. My cousin Jack went to the studio once.
Yeah.
He was older than me. He made it down there. He said it was a lot of fun to see the insides of the studio. I made a lot of later on conventions in New York. We went to a lot of conventions. Got to meet Fred. Spoke to him once or twice. Yeah. Very nice guy.
Yeah.
Pleasant to talk to, and a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
One thing people don't forget, the sense of humor didn't come out much in the show, but he really had a good sense of humor when he went.
He really did, yeah.
He could laugh, but the nicest guy I would say in that group is David Selby.
Oh, David Selby.
Such a nice, warm person.
He is. I just had him on for the 55th anniversary of Quentin's first appearance, which I'm going to post Saturday.
Great.
Yeah, and he it was just a joy talking to him. He's so nice. He's just genuinely very sweet.
Yeah, he's genuine.
Yeah.
He's a genuine person. So we, that was it. It was just, I didn't have to run home from school. Mm-hmm. We lived my school was 2 blocks away, St. Joseph Patron. Walked 2 blocks, got home, got the Kool-Aid or whatever we drank, and was ready for the television to watch it. So I didn't have to run, but I walked home.
You walked home. Yeah. Oh, that's great. I always said when it was running in syndication. So my uncle Val lived with my grandparents. So I would saunter to my grandparents' house to watch Dark Shadows because it was on every day on Channel 58.
Oh, yeah. Well, when it was rerun in the 80s on Channel 4 in New York, I was working part-time and, I couldn't watch every episode.
Yeah.
And I had my mom say, he set up the tape recorder. I'm like, "Can you press the button and just set it up so we could," and I'd listen to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
She never got into it before. She didn't know anything. And then she started to get into it. She liked it.
Yeah. She got sucked in. Yeah.
She wasn't into horror stuff or anything, but she liked the characters. She liked she watched them all later on. So
yeah. Were you into any of the horror? Like, did you watch Zachary in New York, or did you got to watch
We
any?
had a couple of shows. I was a little too, I don't remember exactly offhand. We did
Hmm.
have some horror hosts
Yeah.
in New York,
Hmm.
but we watched all the horror stuff. There was a show called Creature Features on Channel
Oh yeah,
5,
yeah, yeah.
but there was a guy that was a host. We can't find any footage of it. He was an announcer at Channel 5, I believe,
Hmm.
but he was called the Creep.
Oh,
He
okay.
would
Yeah.
just be in a suit and tie and discuss the show. It was on Saturday nights, like at 8:30. Watched that constantly,
Mhm.
and all the horror stuff that was on, the monster movies, science fiction. Yeah, we were pretty much into that. And
Did
of
you?
course, when we had money, we bought Famous Monsters, Castle of Frankenstein magazine,
Oh,
all the
Castle of
other.
Frankenstein was
Wasn't
great.
that
Yeah,
great? I have all
yeah,
those issues.
yeah. Great
Purchased them over
magazine.
the year, and they did a lot of Dark Shadow stuff too.
Yeah, yeah. They're a cover. Barnabas is on one of the covers, a painting of him, and
Yeah,
it's like a demoness or something.
yeah, yeah. But I mean,
Yeah,
he was on. They were everywhere.
yeah,
I mean, it was just pervasive. Dark
yeah,
Shadows was there at that time. And then it kind of, once it faded away, like you said, it took a little while and it's still, I don't know, it'll ever, how popular it will continue with the new group, even if a television show is made. A show is, I don't know. I
yeah.
mean, it was of its time, I think, and it's very hard to recapture that.
It
But if you have
is.
somebody creative, you might be able to do something.
I always look at, Star Trek and Doctor Who, some have been able to come back by doing, a continuation that
Sure.
still everything that happened before still happened, but now this is what's happening now with references to the past and characters showing up. And that has not been done, at least, on television in a visual medium. So if Mark B. Perry gets that show off the ground that he's trying to do, I'm really hopeful that that will ignite an interest in the original show. I mean, there's
Mhm.
still Dark Shadow still has a big following, but I think as time goes on, it's like I don't want it to fall by the wayside.
No,
These
no.
other shows seem to still continue to maintain a presence, and I'd like to see that for Dark Shadows as well.
Well, I think if it works, that'd be the best way to do it.
Yeah,
Problem is, I think with these shows, they've rehashed everything. They keep
yeah,
going back and doing the same story over
it's
and over
true.
again.
Yeah.
We won't talk about the movie. That's skip that. It was very disappointing, as we all know.
Oh yeah, right. Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
and yeah, even I mean, the '90s show wasn't bad,
Mhm.
but it had its moments, but it didn't have time to grow or develop. So
Yeah, which is unfortunate. I think that deserved more of a chance.
yeah,
I mean, at the time, I enjoyed it. I mean, the original will always be very special to me, but the 91 show I always give a nod to because I did enjoy it, but it didn't get much of a chance.
yeah,
But we'll see what happens. I mean, all these other things seem to always like Twilight Zone recently had
of
what was
course,
it,
yeah.
a few years ago, Twilight Zone came back, and it's like I think eventually it's inevitable that it will, but it's a matter of whether the audience is going to connect with it, and
That's
hopefully,
it, you know. I
yeah,
mean, there's so much product out now. So
yeah,
somewhere somebody will do it, but will they do it well? And will it
yeah,
be successful? And
yeah,
will it spark interest in the original?
yeah,
It's such a different world today.
yeah,
Just watching a show every day, the whole setup of it, how it worked, is so different. There's not many soap operas around anymore. I don't know
very few.
and there's a young audience today has to have things moving quickly, fast, you
Yep,
know, they get
yep,
bored quickly. You
mhm,
see the movies that are out today. It's got to be nonstop movement. So how do you get an interest in something that's a little bit, even if you update it, how do you do
yeah.
that?
It's true, yeah, and the Gothic genre too is not known for being, quick cuts
Right,
and
right.
jumping from things. It's kind of a slow burn, kind of a thing. One before we get into these supporting characters, you mentioned before we started recording, your how you discovered the Gold Key Dark Shadows
Mhm.
comic book. Can you talk a little bit about
Oh,
that too?
sure. Well, as I said back then, there was no internet, there was no information on anything usually, unless the comic book company promoted stuff months in advance, like Stan Lee would do, because he was a great promoter of the comics. Western Gold Key was not that way. They did have like a full fan page in the comics, but I think probably the same month as when they announced it. So we walked in, my brother and my cousin Jack walked into our local candy store one day, and we look up there and see an issue of Dark Shadows comic book with Dark. So what's this? Most comics back then were 12 cents or so. They were going to 15 cents. It was a quarter, which was a lot of money. but it had a poster inside, photo cover of Jonathan. I was like in shock. It's like, wow,
Yeah.
this is great. And I think it came out on a quarterly basis every 3 months. And it wasn't the greatest comic in the world. It had its issues there, but it was charming. There was a charm to it, personality to it. Joe Serta was a decent artist. Been around quite a while, and it's quirky. But the fact is, just to be in surprise, and Marvel or DC, the major companies could not produce that comic because they were under the restrictions of the Comics Code Authority, which did not allow vampires to be shown, which obviously makes absolutely no sense because you could turn the TV on every afternoon and see a vampire. You
Yeah.
could see Bela Lugosi and every horror creature on TV as a kid. So why would you, stop, not have that out? It made no sense.
It really didn't. And Gold Key was able to get away with doing it because, as you were saying, before
They
we
were
started.
more wholesome type company because they did a lot of the Disney material. They did a lot of television adaptations, and it just passed through. I mean, they did it. They didn't get any flack, which is fascinating. But that's the way it was.
Yeah, and they
And it
they had a
lasted for quite a while.
it did, yeah, until
Past the TV
76.
show, yeah.
Yeah, I think it lasted till 76. And they did also a lot of TV licensed
Twilight
TV
Zone,
comics.
Boris
Yeah.
Karloff, Tales of Mystery,
Yeah.
a
Yep.
lot of that. So they did horror
The
oriented stuff.
Monsters, well, which was more comedy,
Yeah,
horror
but I mean,
comedy, but
they were able to do any of them, almost all of that. You
yeah.
know,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think Marvel, if they would have had the rights, would have done a great job.
And the Occult Files of Dr. Spectre.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Speaking of Don Glut, yeah.
So
um
no, there was that, but that was yeah, it was kind of surprising and fun to get that. Just
mhm.
totally, and it's great that you could get surprised like that. Today, you can never get surprised. No way can you replicate that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they did the Dynamite comics not too long ago. But those I thought it leaned a little too there was something a little off. I mean, Stewart's a great writer. It wasn't Stewart. I think it's Dynamite's direction
Okay,
in terms of the Dynamite company.
right.
Wanted a lot more emphasis on the kind of horror splatter kind of stuff. And it's
Hmm.
like, this feels off. There was not as much, it didn't feel Dark Shadows to me. It was cool to
Yeah,
see
that
the
doesn't.
designs looking like Frid and
Right.
Selby and etc. But it was not. It
That doesn't
wasn't.
work for me. The
Yeah,
blood, the splatter stuff
yeah.
doesn't really attract me that much.
I'd love to see a new Dark Shadows comic book that's like really true to the series, the original
Yeah,
series.
what I always found interesting in the early days, I think they've
Mm.
discussed it, Tom, and occasionally on the show, is that I don't think they able or allowed to use the word vampire early on.
Right,
That
yeah,
word was not used for like months.
till
I
1795.
think Dan Curtis once said, no, that's not true. I said, I think standards and practices says don't use the word. And little by little, right, first time it was mentioned, it was like, what? They said vampire. You knew what he was.
Yes,
They didn't
it was
mention.
shocking. It was like they finally said it. I
Yeah.
do remember that. It was Angelique said it to Ben, and she said, "Ben, do you know the word vampire?"
Yeah.
And it was, she said vampire. I can't believe she said it. And then after that, the
Yeah. But early on, they always
yeah.
avoided that.
Yeah,
You know.
Barnabas is dead, and they felt they
Yeah.
were always kind of would dance around, and they'd almost say it. I remember one time, Julia said, Barnabas was threatening David,
Right.
and she said a child being his life is threatened by a. She said something to that effect, and she stopped, and he said, "By what? By a what, doctor?" And
Yeah.
she wouldn't say it, but it was like what she meant. It was really cool.
I
Um,
don't even when with Jason McGuire, I don't think they mentioned it.
no,
He
no.
catch him and say, well, what is he? He walks by night, but he's dead.
Yes, yeah, they
you
wouldn't
know.
say the word, yeah. So let's speaking of all these, we're talking about these great characters on the show. Now, these are prominent characters that were in many episodes,
There's
but we
one
also
major one I have to give a heads up to because he was one of my favorites. Was Thayer
okay.
David.
Oh, Thayer
Thayer
David,
Day
yeah.
was incredible. Just his
Yeah,
personality. He was quirky. He was humorous. He was
yeah.
smart. He just and I loved his acting there. He was good in every role he played.
Oh,
But I
yeah.
loved Professor Stokes.
Arguably the best actor in the show. I
Yeah,
mean, he just
yeah.
fantastic. Nancy Barrett was very good too. She was excellent too.
Oh,
But
definitely.
I
Definitely.
love both. There's so many good actors in the show, but Thayer was both of them are very versatile in the types of characters they could play. Like, you had Thayer David playing Ben Stokes, but then he's the highly intelligent, sophisticated
Exactly.
Professor Stokes. And then
He was
he's the
versatile.
evil Count Patofi, who's, delightfully evil,
Oh, and
And
I heard an interview or saw an interview with Fred. I forget from where it was. Several weeks ago, and he was praising Thea David. I didn't hear that before, but he just
Yeah.
said he was such a delightful person to work with, easy to work with, helped me out. I always knew his lines. He was very, very impressed with him. So it was
Yeah.
nice to hear it coming from Fred.
So, but these Thayer, certainly a prominent actor in the show, played many prominent characters in the show, but we also had a lot of great actors, a lot of great theater actors would come in and just do these parts. So I tried to use a rule of thumb to decide what constituted a supporting character, and my kind of vague rule of thumb here was like 10 episodes or less. I don't know what you
Okay, I
used for your.
broke it, I think. Let's see. 1 or 2 times I broke it.
That's
Oh,
okay.
maybe more than that.
That's
I have
okay.
listings of how many times they showed up.
I tried to make notes of
Some of
that
the
too.
3 or 4, but they were just memorable,
Yeah. How about you kick it off? I mean,
Want me to start out?
Go for it. Yeah.
Okay.
Mine are in no
First one, I
particular.
didn't make a list. Let me start with I
Yeah.
should follow the list.
Mine are in no particular order. I'm just going to toss them out. We can kind of
But
jump around here.
well, Craig Slocum, who was Harry Johnson,
Harry
and
Johnson, yes.
Noah, which I didn't care for that part.
Noah,
I know he's
was
not a
different.
popular guy,
Noah
but I thought he was perfect for Harry Johnson. Mrs. Johnson's son, who's always being put upon and gets into all sorts of issues with everybody, gets involved with Nicholas Blair. So I thought he worked for that type of character, but the tough
Agreed.
guy that was working with Nathan, no, that didn't really work for him.
A lot of people don't, a lot of people kind of are dismissive of Harry Johnson. I thought Craig Slocum was a perfect Harry Johnson. He just,
Exactly.
It was an interesting character type that, I mean, a little bit from the family tree of early Willie Loomis, I guess,
Sure.
but a little, but not the same. He's just more kind of a
wimpy type character.
Yeah, like, whatever. I don't want to
Mrs. Johnson was just berating him all the time.
Yes.
Never believed anything. Harry, you're getting into trouble again. What are you doing?
And he's always like, what, Mom? Like, and then he has to take care of Adam, or like he helps Carolyn with Adam,
Yes.
And then
Poor guy.
Then he becomes Nicholas's servant, unwilling servant. So yeah, good choice there. Yeah, with Harry.
Well,
good. Yeah.
Only 3 episodes, I think. Anita Bolster with IMH.
Oh my goodness, yes.
People pick on her for forgetting that line. Number one, she was a stage actor. She had done so much. I saw her in an episode of Secret Agent for like 2 seconds a few weeks ago. And I said, that's her. But she had a long career, and she was an older person, but she made one error there, but she was so good in that part. She played that part so well.
Agreed.
Convincing.
Agreed. Yeah, she was a white witch, good kind of shades of gray a little bit.
Well, it did remind me a little Exorcist, pre-Exorcist, when Barnabas was possessed and he started, remember the way he acted?
Yeah, that was great.
That was pre-Exorcist there. I'm like, wow, look at the way he did that well.
He did.
Became Angelique, right? Or he became possessed by Angelique.
Or something.
You will die, that type of,
Yeah. Like sometimes it was Barnabas and sometimes it was kind of Angelique. She was speaking to Angelique. So,
right.
But Anita Bolster was fantastic. She had a gravitas, it's unfortunate that there was that one error. And I know initially, I believe MPI took that out. There was an editor at MPI that took that out and people were furious that they were taking out things like that. Sure. So they put it back in. Yeah, and I can see preserving the original broadcast of what it was like. But
Danielle, as a kid seeing that, I don't think we noticed any errors. And black and white TV, I don't remember ever saying to my brother to me, "Oh, they made a mistake." You didn't notice it.
I didn't notice either, even when I was a kid too. Except, sometimes if something would fall down, I would notice that. Like things would just, something would fall.
The shade goes up, things like that.
That
something falls on the floor. Occasionally, but I mean, it was so minor.
Yeah.
And you think it's really done practically live. What they went through. It's amazing that how well it worked.
Absolutely.
All the time. Yeah. And anyway, we'll get to Diana DeVillo, who was Julianka.
Yes, she was great.
She was very good.
She was amazing. Yes,
she was in 4 episodes.
Yeah, she was cocky, very kind of intimidating, beautiful.
Yeah.
Intimidating.
She was tough. She had a tough personality, and
very memorable performance. Memorable performance.
Yeah, I wish she would have been on more. They should have used her a little more.
Julianka,
been a good character to keep around. They killed her off too early.
It's true, and I'm surprised they didn't bring her back because she gave a great performance as Julianka. Yeah, coming for the hand of Patofi.
Jane Draper, who played Suki
Oh,
Forbes.
yes. Oh,
5
she's one of my
episodes. I
favorites
thought she was on much longer, only 5.
because she left such an impact. I mean, that's
Yes.
why. I mean, she was great. Yeah. What are your thoughts on her?
No, she was just a great personality. Again, strong personality, interesting
Uh-huh.
character, cunning. Really
Yes.
was. She was a match for Nathan.
Totally. Yes.
Yes,
She was dynamite. I loved Suki Forbes, Jane Draper. Like you said, a great match for Nathan Forbes. She was also a schemer, just confident. I mean, I wish she's one. I definitely wish they had brought back that actress to Jane Draper to
oh,
play.
definitely.
Even if it's not Suki was short lived, but which is surprised. It's one of those characters that they bring in and like, oh, she's throwing a monkey wrench into Nathan's
Exactly. Yeah.
schemes, and then Barnabas kills her, and it's kind of shocking because you expect that she's going to go on to be a player in the storyline. But that's the thing. Dark Shadows will throw those curveballs, and it's like, whoa. But I loved that actress, and I wish they had brought her back
Yeah,
again.
and you never know personally what happened. Maybe they had other commitments and they don't want to
Oh
replace
yeah,
them. You
sure,
know,
yeah,
there's a lot of
yeah,
these people probably with theater people. They had other jobs
sure, yeah.
and they couldn't stay on, and maybe they would have
Hmm.
kept them. You don't know.
Hmm.
Since we're mentioning a lot of females, we'll put Elizabeth Ice, who played Buffy,
Oh yeah,
15 episodes.
yeah, yeah. That was I didn't have her on my list because she went over my 10, but I loved Elizabeth Ice. Yeah, she was
Yeah,
great. Yeah, Buffy Harrington. Yep,
her character was very good and
she was
interesting.
kind of the Ivy, the Jekyll and Hyde.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah,
That was the
yeah,
Jekyll and Hyde story.
yeah, yep.
Uh, and Kay Fry, the original Pansy Faye.
Yes, yes, she's on my
Much as
list.
I love the redoing,
Yeah,
but she was really good. 4 episodes.
yeah, I loved Kay Fry. Pansy's one of my favorites. I mean Nancy Barrett as Pansy Faye,
Yep.
I adore, but I really enjoyed Kay Fry. Again, this is an unexpected character that gets thrown into Dark Shadows, and just the idea of Carl and Pansy together coming into the
That was
old
odd.
house. And I love Barnabas and Beth's Barnabas and Beth are both pretty serious, somber characters, and here are
Right.
these two clownish kind of characters
Right.
that
And you
come in and
needed a
just
little mixture. You needed to
oh,
broke things up a
absolutely.
bit.
I'm surprised Big Finish never did like an
Oh
episode with the
yeah, that would have
ghosts
been
of
great.
Carl and Pansy reunited in the afterlife or something. Because yeah, Kay Fry, she was fantastic as Pansy. Agreed.
All right, we're breaking our rule now. This is 36
Okay.
episodes, but I have to have a shout out to Dana Elgar, who played the original
Oh
Sheriff
yes.
Patterson most of the time, and he went into a great lot of acting on him. I thought he was very good in that part.
He was excellent. He was certainly I mean, when I think of Sheriff Patterson, it's Dana Elcar that my mind
Some of
goes
those
to.
other Sheriff Pattersons did
Yeah,
not work too well.
yeah, it's unfortunate. Dana Elcar was a great actor, and he sold that part. I mean, it was not a he was in quite a few episodes, especially he shows up a lot in
36,
in
36
quite a
episodes.
few. Yeah, so but he was great, and I would have liked to have seen him continue as Sheriff Patterson in the show.
I think he
Uh,
came and went a couple of times, and the worst part to me was when Dr. Wood had died, and I
mhm,
forgot there was another sheriff that filled in. It just didn't work out. It would have worked much. The next day, he had to go investigate. There was a guy I think he was there for 1 day or so. Did
yeah.
not did not work. He would have been much better, especially in that part of the storyline.
Yes, yeah, yeah. And then they just kind of phased the character out of the show, unfortunately. So
Yeah.
Sheriff Patterson retired and got replaced by Sheriff Davenport, apparently.
Well, for a while, yes, he's on here
Briefly.
somewhere. Of course, I have to make. I was looking at this. I skipped this the first time, and I didn't realize he was only in 4 episodes. Michael Cage, Buzz,
Buzz,
a wonderful Buzz.
yes.
I just got a big kick out of that character. I don't know what it was. I would have liked to see some interaction with him and Barnabas. Would have been fun.
Yes.
It had one humorous scene, but he was just personality, just so weird to have someone like him in the show.
Absolutely.
And the best girl boyfriend that Carolyn ever had.
Yeah, yeah,
When you
true.
think about it.
The only one who wasn't a monster. Well, maybe not the only one, but
And he was honest. He
Joe
didn't
was
do anything. He wasn't a criminal. He didn't do. He was just, living his life.
Joe
Loving her.
Joe was a good boyfriend. Carolyn was not a good
She's
girlfriend
not a good. Yeah,
Yeah, to Joe.
she had issues picking some of the men. Yeah,
Yeah,
but he
but
was just got a kick out of watching his scenes, and I always think he was in more.
Yeah, again, such an impact. Buzz, Michael Hadge as Buzz was great. Again, another example, like you said, of out of left field character being thrown into the Dark Shadows universe that doesn't really belong there, but it works. It's just kind of a counterbalance to everything else going on. And friends of mine who I've shown Dark Shadows to always mention to me like, I love Buzz.
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
And he has a cult following. I mean,
I heard interviews when he was still alive. He had interviewed.
he's still around.
Is he still with us?
Yeah, he was the literary license, unless he passed away recently, but I think I would have heard about that. He was on the Literary License podcast.
Okay.
Tom Diamond interviewed him for Literary License maybe 2 years ago. If you look on YouTube, I can send you the link to it. But they interviewed Michael Hadge, which I was surprised I hadn't seen any interviews with him, and he hadn't done any festivals or anything as far as I was aware. But yeah, he talked about Dark Shadows and theater, and seemed like
he was a hoot, especially the interactions with Dennis Patrick.
Oh yes, yeah.
The two scenes I remember when he was when Buzz was on the steps.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't move. You know?
Yeah, yes.
Just barely, he wanted him to get up and he didn't want to do. And then when he tried to bribe him,
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. And he
wouldn't. The bike and the girl, he would not.
Yeah.
He wasn't going anywhere.
I loved his interaction with Joan Bennett. Did he call her mommy?
Oh, yeah. I was like, very odd. That's why I would have liked to see his interaction with Barnabas there. Yes. Just the look on his face.
Yeah, that would have been interesting. Yeah,
incredible.
Good choice there.
We have Janet Canada Humphrey, Janet Finley.
Oh, yes.
Humphrey. Three episodes.
Madam Finley, she was great.
Yeah. Just a great personality, just fit in perfectly with the characters there, with that type of show.
Perfect medium character, but she was I have quite a few of these on my list. With Dark Shadows, they had a tendency to use these very theatrical people out of the theater, and she is a prime example of that. A very theatrical personality,
definitely,
like you said, fits that vibe perfectly. This very dramatic medium who comes in and is unfortunately she's not a match for the ghost of Quentin.
Well, mediums coming into Collinwood didn't usually do too well.
Does not end well for them.
Never ended well for them.
No. There's another actress on the show who is on my list too. I don't know if you have her on your list, but she has that kind of vibe too, where she's very
Hannah Stokes.
Correct. Yes.
Yes, another Stokes. No, I have her down. She appeared in 7 episodes. Yeah, she was. I thought she was great too.
Paula Lawrence. She was again another great theater actress. She had a substantial career in theater. She was a successful Broadway actress, I think, since the 30s. I mean, she had been doing a lot of Broadway, and she came in because Timothy Stokes, David was doing House of Dark Shadows, so they brought in Aunt Hannah Stokes. And I wish they had kept her when they brought Timothy Stokes in, because it would have been really great to have them as a duo.
Interact.
The brother and sister, the evil brother and sister. I think that would have been, because I love Timothy Stokes, who was so seedy. The evil Professor Stokes version of Professor Stokes. So it would have been great to have the two of them together,
like you said.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of these people, they pick good people. They really pick good people for the show. And,
they sure did. Yeah.
Theatrical people that came in really hit it well. So who do we have here? Another favorite of mine. Only 9 episodes, and I felt another fellow that I thought was on much more. The original caretaker, Daniel Keyes.
Oh my goodness!
He was the other guy that replaced him. Never. He was just so fit perfectly that personality.
Peter Murphy replaced him. But Daniel Keyes, agree. Yeah. Big time.
Just interacting with all the Collinwood people coming up to that cemetery all the time. And there was one where Fred as Barnabas was just so exasperated with him he couldn't even deal.
I love that scene.
He's like, who? David something died in 1840, and he's just no, this boy, he's alive, and he was just sitting so frustrated. Surprised he didn't off him. It's like, enough.
Yes, yeah. So strange and eccentric. He's wonderful. He was wonderful. He's one. Unfortunately, what happened is, along with Robert Garringer, who was Dr. Woodard, they wouldn't cross the picket line during the strike. So
we lost quite a few. Guarantee, yeah. Again,
And Les
first Dr.
Garinger.
Wood.
Yep, and Daniel Keyes. And for those who haven't seen the pre-Barnabas episode, you do get more caretaker in the Laura storyline, in the Phoenix storyline, because the caretaker shows
Oh,
up
you definitely, yeah.
in there too. So you get more of him because he's just batty. I love him.
Well, going back to the original, before pre-Barnabas, I don't think it was in the later. Richard Gardner, Hugh Franklin, who played Richard Gardner.
Yes,
I liked him.
yeah,
Father and son team, I believe.
great. He had that classic, almost classic Hollywood kind of a feel to him. He just had I could have seen him in a 1930s movie as
Definitely,
a
yeah. He fit
lawyer.
into that personality.
Yeah.
Another could have been a boyfriend for Vicky.
Oh
Came
yeah,
and went.
Frank Garner, the
Frank
son.
Gardner.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's it.
Cunard
Right.
Fox.
The father and son.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he definitely was that classic. Was again mixing them up. Sorry about that. Yep. And then we have the various reverends. I didn't even mark how many times. Reverend Bland.
Oh,
Reverend, I mean, the judge. These poor guys came in. There was always
Judge
something
Fail.
horrible happening.
Yep.
Usually couldn't finish their work.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know how many weddings we got through.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Reverend Bland is the one that definitely jumps to mind.
And I love the name too.
Reverend Bland.
Reverend Bland. Those are great.
Yeah.
We had John Lazel, Dr. Guthrie.
Oh, Dr. Guthrie. Yeah. He was in I didn't have him on my list because he was in quite a few episodes, but he was.
I don't have a number next to him, but yeah. He was good. He played that part well too.
I enjoyed him a lot. He was a great, parapsychologist character, kind of a proto Professor Stokes. I enjoyed his performance a lot. I was sad when he died. I think John Lascelles himself, I believe he is still alive, unless no obituary was released. But I mean, he's in his 90s for sure. But I'm fairly confident that he is still with us. And he was also in the Twilight Zone. He had a
substantial
career. And I would love. I mean, I don't know if he would do an interview at this point, but even if it's a text interview, I wonder if he.
Doesn't hurt to try.
You never know. I mean, people in their 90s. Some people are very sharp still into their 90s, so it'd be interesting to.
I've never heard an interview from him. That'd be great to see what his thoughts on the show.
Yeah.
And of course, another one, 5 episodes. I thought he was on forever. Paul Michael, King Johnny Romano.
Yes. Oh, yeah, King Johnny.
One shouldn't have killed off or brought back somehow, right? He was such an over-the-top character, just personality,
He was amazing. King Johnny, my friend Ivan, who I got to start watching Dark Shadows, he loved King Johnny. He was doing King Johnny impressions. And my friend Joseph, too, who was also big fan of King Johnny Romano.
He was really dramatic and theatrical. He had that cape.
Yeah.
Walk in with, and he was just really, again, only 4 episodes.
Yeah, Paul Michael.
5, I'm sorry.
Yeah, he played the King of the Gypsies. A very theatrical personality, super cocky, very enjoyable to watch, very confident, this kind of arrogance to him. I loved him. And he was Marion Ross's, part Marion Ross from Happy Days, Mrs. Cunningham. He was her partner for decades. I mean, they were together for a very long time. And then, of course, she did Arsenic and Old Lace with Jonathan Frid. So I wonder if
there's a connection.
I wonder if Paul Michael showed up at those shows. There's great. Yeah, he's a great actor. Yeah.
I wish he would have come back even in another part,
For sure.
Some of those, they just, disappeared for whatever reason, which was unfortunately. Ed Riley, Sheriff Davenport, I had to mention him.
Yes.
Came back from the dead.
Yes.
I kind of like the way he played that zombie type character.
It was the first time I've ever seen a talking zombie. That was interesting.
Yeah. That was odd. The makeup they had for him, and poor guy.
Yeah, and his first name is Sheriff, I guess, because that's what's on his screen.
That was the weirdest head. They couldn't put a first name in there. It's like, what are you doing?
So I don't know. It's either his first name, maybe, or it's such an honor to be the sheriff of Collinsport that you get your title on your gravestone.
Yeah, with all the weird goings on, of course. You should definitely have that title. Another pre-Barnabas was Frank Schoenfeld, Bill Malloy.
I loved Bill Malloy.
He was incredible.
He was great. Another one I wish they had brought back. In fact, one thing I've mentioned before is when they did 1970 Parallel Time, I think it would have been really cool to have the Parallel Time Bill Malloy show up.
Yeah.
That would have been interesting to have him come back, Frank Schofield, because I didn't have him on my list because it was in a number of I don't did you have the number down for him?
No, I didn't. For some
Yeah,
reason,
he was in
he's
a number of
probably
shows,
he was in
but
quite a bit.
he
New
felt like
England,
somebody who came from a small town in a fishing town in Maine. He just had that.
definitely had that New England atmosphere,
Yeah, yeah,
and he was really great with very loyal to the family.
yeah.
He played that part so well,
Excellent
Shame when
actor.
they killed him off. It was like, wow.
Agreed, agreed. Yeah, he was one
Pre
I knew it was
Barnabas
coming.
stories, yeah.
Yeah.
He really held up. Him and again, Theo David was in there
Oh yeah,
earlier
Matthew
too.
Morgan. Yeah.
Matthew Moore, that's right. Another part
Yeah.
that he
Yeah.
started with.
It's like the evil Ben Stokes almost.
Yeah.
In fact, when Vicky first sees Ben, because I'd watched 1795,
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
certainly before I'd watched pre-Barnabas, because those were not released
Me too.
in syndication. Yeah. So when she first sees Ben, she's scared. She calls, "It's Matthew Morgan."
Yeah, no, it was great that they referenced that.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't see too. I saw those episodes much later, like you said, on either videotape or DVD.
Hmm.
The original, and I enjoyed the original series. It had something going for it.
Me too. Yeah.
Was much more slow moving. You know,
Hmm.
mostly dealt with Burke.
Yeah,
And the revenge, but still, I think it has its moments.
yeah,
It
yeah.
worked well. And speaking of, since here's one I really broke the rules on this one, but I think he really needs a shout out because he's sometimes speaking roles, sometimes not, but he brought personality and atmosphere to the show. Bob O'Connor, Bob the bartender.
Bob the bartender. Yes,
I
yes,
just thought he was perfect as the bar. That was his part. He was just really, really good at that part. He fit in perfectly with that scene.
yes.
Sometimes he'd give him speaking roles, usually not.
Yep.
But there's one scene in particular I remember, which just I don't know if it was pre-Barnabas or not. Don't recall, but it's with Burke Devlin and I think probably John Carlin. I'm not sure if it was still John Carlin as Willie, but he's taunting Burke, and then he starts a fight, and I think the switchblade comes out, and Bob gets over there with the bottle. And
Yes.
says, "Skip it, Bob. I can handle this punk." And he takes him over. So not even a speaking role, but I just remember that.
Oh, it's just great his reactions that he was going to get. Yeah, that he was going to intervene, and you don't want to mess with Bob the bartender. That's for sure. With a cigar,
I think he spoke once in a while. They gave him some speaking. I
once in a
remember
while they throw him a
when
line.
Maggie was memory was coming back. I think he spoke a few times in that area because they were trying to get him involved in something. They were all talking about where did she come back? What happened to her? Or when she got into the her memory started to come back. She walked into the went into the blue whale, and you had a whole bunch of this. First, I had all these people that were standing around.
Yeah, perfect
biggest
casting.
crowd you ever had in the blue whale.
It's true. Yeah, perfect casting though. That's the thing with Dark Shadows. It was always like right on the nose. Like it's like, wow, this guy feels like a bartender who would be in this fisherman's tavern in small town Maine. We just had that feel to him. And even though he didn't have a lot of speaking lines periodically, but he has just his reactions to things and he wiping down the bar and kind of observing what's going on.
Yes.
Or he was great. Agreed.
Yeah, no, he brought something flavor to the series.
Yep.
I don't think they used the blue whale much later in the last year or so. They were too busy traveling all over, so you didn't see much, I don't think.
I know during summer 1970, I don't even think we saw the blue whale at all. I don't think. Not sure. I don't think we did. But yeah.
Well, that's most of my list. You added some to the.
I have a few to add to the list here. You got most of them, but there are definitely a couple I want to throw out there.
Good. I have another list here somewhere too. So.
There are two characters played by this actor that I want to mention. Although he played three, he also played a third character. Mm-hmm. Garth Blackwood from 1897, right. Played by John Harkins. I want a Universal horror film based on the Garth Blackwood. He's right out of one of those movies. Yes. He just looks and feels like something right out of a classic 30s horror film, or maybe either Universal or maybe one of the other studios, maybe a Monogram. I don't know.
How could you forget him? Yeah, definitely. I'm sorry, I missed him.
John Harkins. So theatrical. He was just so much. 5 episodes.
Anyone that could scare Count Petofi,
Yeah, right. 5 episodes. Very, very kind of striking look with the big black beard and the black coat, and the black coat and the chain and the leg dragging his leg, and with that accent, like the prisoner must be apprehended.
Yeah, he was. He was incredible.
Amazing with the unibrow. I just incredible. John Harkins was amazing. And then completely different. If I didn't know that was John Harkins, he also played another character I enjoyed, which was Horace Gladstone in Parallel
Oh,
Time,
that's
8
right.
episodes. Totally different character. Looked completely.
Oh,
He didn't
another
have the
sleazy character. It was a real
very
sleazy character.
sleazy. Yeah, I
You
was
know, he
gonna
just
say.
drips of sleaziness there. Yeah, I forgot. I didn't realize that was the same one. I forgot.
Yeah,
Wow.
Horace Gladstone, seedy, sweaty,
Yeah.
but just delightful. Again, this is a character I could picture in some film noir film, like a Peter Lorre kind of
Oh,
a
definitely.
guy.
I think I've seen him in other movies too.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
just quite a character actor there. You know, he
That,
was
but
something.
but that type of character, yeah, he was, trying to blackmail Cyrus Longworth, and because he finds out that he's also John Yeager, but he was a great character too, great character actor. He also played Lieutenant Costa, I believe, I think in the Laura Phoenix storyline pre-Barnabas, but he was
Okay.
just a cop in that. He was not, there
Okay.
wasn't anything, he was fine in the role, but it was those other two characters are just very memorable to me. The other,
I had one more in here that I had
oh,
forgotten.
go for
How
it.
could I
Yeah.
forget that? It was on my
Yeah.
other side of my list over here. Of course,
Yeah.
Abe Vigoda, Ezra Braithwaite. And
Oh,
he's
yes.
incredible in the
I loved him as Ezra Braithwaite. Perfect call out there for Ezra Braithwaite. Oh, I forgot to put him on my list, and I
I
should
saw
have.
him at one of the Dark Shadows conventions. He was a lot of fun. He
Yeah.
was funny. Like,
Yeah.
I did this show 50 years, 60, 50 years. He says, who remembers this? I did one party. He says, but he was talking about it. He was just, I don't believe people are still watching this. It's amazing. A
Yeah.
really nice guy. A lot of fun.
Oh, great. Great.
Pleasant. And that he actually attended a show was great, you know.
I was so happy that he did go to a Dark Shadows festival,
Yeah.
and he played two roles in Dark Shadows. He also played Otis Green in
Oh, that's right.
1840. He
Exactly.
played Otis Green as well, he was very good also as Otis Green. But Ezra Braithwaite
Yeah,
is
with the
one that
glasses, he couldn't see. I mean,
with the
it was so
glasses.
well done. Poor guy.
I felt so bad that he died. I was like, because I
Yeah, he
liked
was a
him. He was
likable
very
character, you
likable.
know, just a
He was,
quirky,
he,
character that just fit perfectly in Collinwood.
and Abe Vigoda was always an old man.
Yeah, he
Even
made
at
jokes
that
of. He says, People think I'm dead." You know, he says, "I've been doing this for years."
He's been, yeah, he was, I mean, when he did that part, I must have been in his 40s. So, and he was playing this,
He
very
always,
old man.
yeah, he always played these older
But
parts.
I loved it when he looked at, Quentin, when he put the glasses on, and
Oh,
he's like, "Oh, I know who you are. Yes, Quentin Collins."
Quentin,
Then
yeah.
the realization dawns on him.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
that
you're
was
dead.
perfect. That was perfect.
He was great. Yeah, very, very good choice there. Um, okay. Mr. Best, played by Emery Bass.
Oh, of course.
Death.
He's
Death
another one
himself.
stepped out of a movie, you know.
Absolutely. He was only in 3 episodes. He's another one I thought was in more episodes. Later, he came back in 1840 to play a minister, but
Right.
he was excellent as Mr. Best, the genteel death.
Yes. Yes.
You know,
That just worked perfectly.
just a kind of a Twilight Zone type character, something that stepped out
Yes,
of
I
the
was thinking
Twilight
of
Zone.
that myself.
Yeah.
Very much a Twilight Zone type character.
But he was, yeah, there was some, even though he was gentlemanly, but he was also spooky. There was some,
Oh,
I mean, as he
definitely. He
should
had that
be, because
quality.
he's death. He did, yeah, he had a spooky quality to him.
Mhm.
I mean, you could almost, I mean, you could sense, well, this is a very powerful being, but he's polite.
Right.
I really enjoyed his Emery Bass's performance as Mr. Best. I thought he was great. Another great kind of
Well,
theater actor that just
I was
fits
just
the
thinking,
vibe of, yeah.
I don't know the character actor, but the actor, the voice of Diabolos.
Oh, Dwayne Morris. Dwayne, and he
He
was
was,
also his body too.
he was a great devil. Yes.
He was excellent. I was just talking about him with Alan Gallant actually, because yeah, he had that, the voice was creepy. I mean, it was just, there was something off about the
Mhm.
way he spoke and delivered those lines, theatrical, but unsettling as well. And just the imposing height and that weird voice you have summoned. I can't,
Oh, I just came
obviously I
up with
can't.
two more since you spent the
Oh,
creepy and
oh, go for it.
theatrical with the Leviathan, the two
Oh,
Leviathan characters
yes,
that got
Oberon and
Barnabas. They were
Haza.
just doing all this stuff. Speaking of Marvel Comics, I was just thinking of all of that because they did this stuff in like Sub-Aaron or Roy Thomas might have been inspired by that, where he had a
Oh,
serpent's head and Naga and all of this. So I suspect he might have been in watching those episodes and got inspired to do something similar.
Was this the Submariner run
In the 60s, yeah.
in the 60s?
1968, 69, something like that in
Okay.
the period, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but those two characters, they didn't speak. No, they spoke.
Oberon and Haza. Yeah,
Yeah, just
yeah.
really weird looking, odd characters, and they were only on for an episode or two, I think, too. But yeah,
They were great. I agree. Yeah, again, yeah, very memorable, kind of striking people. Another one, I think this is the last one I have here. I'll just double check. Oh, actually, I just thought of another. I keep thinking of more. There was one I have on my list, and there's another one I want to throw out there too. I'll mention them both. Istvan,
oh,
played
he's
by
gone. Yes,
Henry Baker,
yeah.
was in 4 episodes. Did not have any speaking lines, but
Unfortunately, yeah.
yeah,
But he was good. Yeah, it's just his presence,
very imposing presence. I felt bad for. I mean, I
I
know
did feel bad for the way they killed him.
Barnabas just like
Yeah.
hypnotized him into
horrible.
walking off a cliff. It's like, wow, that's pretty harsh. But
This
that's
was
the
a
thing with
big,
Barnabas.
imposing character. That was, it would have been interesting to keep him going. Yeah,
He was
with
great,
that speaking part.
and he did then go on to do a movie with Jonathan Frid, Seizure. He was
Oh,
in
that's right. Yeah.
Oliver Stone's first film, which Henry Baker was in that as well. But the other one that came to mind was Conrad Bain as Mr. Wells, the
Oh, he was
innkeeper
perfect.
at the Collinsport Inn. Another one
He
who
was
came to the
perfect.
festival too. He came to a festival too and said, "What the hell am I doing here?"
He was perfect in that role as the hotel clerk.
Mhm.
He just fit in.
He
Kind of guy
really
that
did.
was involved in everything, knew what was going on. He was the
Yeah,
center of what was happening in the place.
yeah,
And
and
they
yeah,
knock him out. Did he get killed?
he got killed
That
by
was
the
like the
werewolf.
bloodiest episode they ever used. They did when you saw
Yeah,
blood. I mean, I think that was the most violent one they'd ever shown.
it
When
was pretty
the werewolf
violent. Yeah,
killed him, and you see pulling him off, and you see blood on the. Oh, that
blood's
was
dripping
they
down
got
his
a yeah.
face.
That was they didn't do too much of that.
And they
But I
did
guess they
some.
tried to see how far they could go.
Yeah, I mean, the werewolf mangled him. I guess to get that across that the werewolf was
Yeah,
very violent. But yeah, Conrad Bain. I mean, he was in some of the pre-Barnabas shows, and it was
yeah.
really cool that they brought him back like 2 years later to play Mr. Wells again.
Yeah, there's something nice about that when you have that continuity and these
Yeah,
characters come back. You're familiar, even though they're part of the scenery. It's a
yeah.
small town. It kind
Hmm.
of fits in so well with that atmosphere of the show.
Sure. And people like, it's interesting, Conrad Bain and Ava Goda then went on to be, very successful
Sure.
actors in television, had this very successful television series. But it's cool that they both actually came back to just do to a Dark Shadows festival. That must have been a hoot for them to
Yeah.
to do
I mean, it
that.
must
Yeah.
be amazing to that people still remember it. It's still out there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's with all the stuff they've done, all the
Yeah.
work they've done.
Sure.
So
So I have 2 more characters I want to mention. And one of them was prominently listed here on my list, and I forgot to mention her when I was talking to Nick, and that's Portia Fitzsimmons, as played by Lovelady Powell. She played the art dealer who wanted to buy some of Sam Evans' paintings from the 1950s, and she was only in 1 episode, but such a memorable character. She definitely left an impression. Such great screen presence, such a theatrical actress, great character, definitely memorable. And lastly, Isabella Hoops, who played Edith Collins in 1897, Grandmama Edith. What a memorable and delightful performance that was. She was just fantastic.
Yeah. And I mean, there are so many more that I'm sure we could, if we kept going, we could just be here all day
you could
throwing
dig
out
through them
names.
all. There's so many, but no, there's a few that don't work too well. I won't mention them. I don't like to. I don't like to focus on the negative. There's a few that I didn't think were very good, or once in a while you see them like, oh, this person's in it, But for the most part, I think we had quite a cast of characters there, besides
Agreed.
the main characters and the supporting characters that really added to the entire series, the entire show.
Agreed.
Brought something special to it, I think.
Added great flavor to some of those episodes to spice things up, or just throw a monkey wrench into things. Really
Yeah.
fun, great casting choices.
Thinking back on it, this was a lot of teens watched the show, and there wasn't a lot of teenage characters in the show. When you
There-
think of young people, there was a wide variety, older people and women and men and all different types that were there. It wasn't just, today you'd want to cater to a young audience. You'd have much younger people. I'm sure they'll probably do that if they remake. You're going to want to have a lot of young people in there. There wasn't much except for David and Amy, and which was great. I related to them and everything.
They didn't really bring in teens very much until Hallie Stokes
Hallie, yeah.
later on, and they had her. But
And then in 1840, they also had Tom Happer as Jeremy Grimes. But and nowadays, I think you're right. I think in fact, that's what was going on. Though when I had Todd McIntosh, the makeup artist, on the podcast, he talked about how that CW pilot, he was the makeup artist for this unaired CW pilot, and CW or WB, was it WB at the time? It was WB at the time. WB. WB really, unsurprisingly, was pushing very hard to have a very young cast for the show.
Yeah.
And there was a big conflict there because Dan Curtis really wanted a more mature cast for the show. And I think you want to have a certain level of gravitas with Dark Shadows. And I think it's difficult to pull, unless you have a very talented younger actor who can pull that off. It's a challenge. I think you've got to kind of have some core mature actors who have a lot of experience under their belts, who can deliver that kind of performance, and you can mix in some younger people as well. But I think if you push too hard in the younger direction, it doesn't have the right feel to me. But that's me. I don't know.
The good thing about Curtis and the producers, they thought outside the box a bit. They didn't follow the rules. There weren't many rules to follow what they were doing, so they would just go their own way. If it worked, it worked. If not, go somewhere else. But today, in a lot of ways, it's more standardized. It's more, you have a lot of people involved, and this was a smaller operation. Let's face it. Curtis was running the show. He had a lot of good people around him, but he didn't have much interference. As long as the stuff was selling well, it was making money for the network. It was left alone. Today, you have a lot of hands involved and a lot of people telling you how it's going to be done. That's in a lot of media, in film and mainstream film, comics, mainstream comics. It's like so many hands involved. You can't really do things outside the box,
Unfortunately.
It's gotta be alternative,
Yeah, it kind of waters things down, and everything gets diffused between all these people who want to have their hands on it or want to put their 2 cents in, and it kind of
it becomes demographics, what audience you want, how many people are going to be watching. You got to cater to everybody, and it's good in a way, but in another way, if it's done well, that's great. But you also have to have good stories, good writing, good acting. That's what really helps bring it together, in any program.
Agreed. And Dark Shadows, fortunately, they had that combination going, and I think that's a big reason why it continues to connect with people, and people get caught up in the great stories and the great performances of the actors in the show.
Do you imagine having someone like Julia Hoffman today?
That's the thing. I don't think we would see somebody like Grayson Hall
would have gotten a part like no.
Or Thayer David. I don't think we would have seen more mature actors that maybe are not like traditional cookie cutter Hollywood, the look they're going for. And I think that's the Dark Shadows actors were so distinctive in how they looked. They were visually striking and memorable. Or Jonathan Frid himself.
Of course.
I mean,
of course, yeah.
I showed a younger friend of mine Dark Shadows because she said, "Oh, my mother had a crush on Barnabas," and then she said, "I watched the show." It was like she was not very complimentary about Jonathan Frid's look, and I said, "Well, I mean, he looked like a vampire. He had that gaunt kind of a look to him." But teenagers were going crazy for
they
Barnabas.
did, yeah.
In magazine and over again, and I guess people's taste change, and what's being put out there in media tends to be very kind of, to me, is kind of these days feels kind of generic a lot to me. It just doesn't
cookie
have
cutter.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't, you had, like you said, they didn't follow the standard Hollywood. They weren't the leading lady, leading man look. It was just character types, which we also had in film and movies a lot too. But they were character actors.
Sure.
Speaking of character actors, but you get people, even rugged individuals that became like Charles Bronson.
Right.
They became stars, but they've started out as character actors.
Well,
really.
even on Dark Shadows, you had that very, something you'd see in classic horror films, that very traditional hero and ingenue types like Joe and Maggie. I could see people who look like Joe and Maggie on TV today, absolutely. But they were great actors too in Dark Shadows.
Lara Parker, of course.
Catherine Lee. Oh yeah, Lara Parker.
Attractive woman there, but she had the character personality.
Traditional beauty, but yet great backgrounds in acting, and theatrical performances, but Catherine Lee Scott too, and Joel Crothers were really good
Oh,
actors.
wonderful.
And but those characters, I mean, once Barnabas became the star, they kind of went on the back burner more and more.
Unfortunately, yeah.
They became the victims in the show because people wanted to follow the story of these outsiders and the monsters and what they were doing, which was a huge first, I think, for television outside of comedy, like something like the Munsters. I'm not counting that. I'm talking
Yeah,
about like
nothing like
drama.
that was happening back then, you know.
Mhm.
It
Yeah,
really stood out.
yeah.
And soap operas, you know, did not do things like this, you know.
Mhm.
Time travel, when you just think about it, they actually decided to go back
Yeah.
in time, play the same
Sure.
roles. It's just stunning, you know.
And I have to wonder if the Marvel monsters, you
Mhm.
know, if though because they were the main characters of those titles, you know, the Monster of Frankenstein and Werewolf
Oh,
by Night
sure.
and you know, Tomb of Dracula. Although Dracula was not very a sympathetic character,
No, no.
he was still a real bad guy in that. But and the Tales of the Zombie. I wonder if I feel that Dark Shadows must have had an influence on those Marvel monsters that came out in the 70s.
Possibly. I don't know if any of the authors mentioned them specifically. There might have been
Yeah,
one or two that
yeah,
followed it, but I don't
yeah,
remember any specific discussion
right.
on that.
Yeah,
There may have been
yeah.
one or two of the writers, certainly, and some of the artists may have been aware of it too.
Mhm.
Uh, but no, it just followed that pattern, you know. There was a
Right.
lot of interest in that type of story for a short while. It kind of like drifted after a while, but the horror stuff was big at one
Yeah.
point, right after Dark Shadows, actually, which is odd.
Yeah,
Because they
there was a
kept going.
70s horror. I mean,
Yeah,
we had the horror craze in the 60s, but also in the it kind of
yeah.
my friend Raymond Castile and I talk about Dark Shadows kind of was a bit of a bridge there in terms of like going from the 60s
Hmm.
monster craze and then went to the 70s. And I think Dark Shadows was an important piece of that in terms of reigniting or continuing the interest in the monster culture and
Oh,
the classic
definitely.
horror stuff. Yeah.
The horror stuff was all over in the 60s, like you said, reruns of all the old Universal movies,
Sure.
horror stuff. You had, of course, the Aurora models were huge. So kids were just, you know, very much into it, you know, and
Yeah.
gum cards. You had the creature, I think you had a couple of cards related to
Yeah.
horror, horror
And the
related, just
Aurora
gum
model
cards.
kits, the Aurora model monster models.
Models were big.
And
Yeah.
then going into the 70s, the Dark Shadows kind of carried, I think Ray said carried the torch into the for Gothic horror into the 70s, because then we had the Aurora reissued, the Glow kits, Famous
Mhm.
Monsters was still going through the 70s. We had the Azrak Hamway International, the A-High Universal Monsters action figures that they came out with, and then even going up to like very early 80s. I think that's in the like very early 80s, around
Right.
83. Lance Brick wrote an article for Scary Monsters magazine where he puts kind of the end of the monster craze in 1983. There was still a lot coming out through the 70s for the classic monster stuff, but then it kind of started to die down more and more.
It fizzled out a bit, you know.
Yeah,
Plus,
unfortunately.
Planet of the Apes was huge.
Oh, well,
That
yeah, I
was
love
another
Planet of
big,
the Apes.
you know,
Yeah, sure.
kind of an offshoot of that. That was a huge, huge. I saw the first movie when it came out,
Roddy
and all the
McDowell.
others, but that was just tremendous. Again, you had no idea about what was going to happen. It was just stunning.
Yeah. Roddy
Yeah,
McDowell was great in that. He's another actor. He would have been great in Dark Shadows, Roddy McDowell.
yeah, no, it was a
Yeah.
great show,
Yeah.
great movie, and great acting in
Yeah.
that first film,
Yeah.
certainly. But no, there was a
Yeah.
lot.
Classic
That
film.
was
Yeah.
that was
Have
the
you
period. You know,
Yeah.
it just
Have you
really
seen the
was.
new Planet of the Apes movies? I haven't seen those. Have you?
I just talked with a friend about the first, the one that came out some years ago, the Tim Burton.
Oh, that was awful. That's Tim
You
Burton.
just, I told my
Leave
friend and I said, I
existing
remember
things
the
alone.
ending. That was bad. He goes, I don't remember. I took everything and just went out of my head.
To me,
Very disappointing.
that was the first Tim Burton movie I saw. There I was like, oh, Tim Burton has lost it here, because his early films I really enjoyed a lot. I
They
thought
were really good. Yeah.
they were really great. I mean, he was
Ed Wood, I think, was his best.
Oh, Ed Wood was
You know, but yeah, in the
wonderful.
past number of years, it just, I don't know.
I will. I'm gonna wrap it up here. Nick, thank you again for
Well,
joining me
thank you.
today to talk
It's great
about.
to discuss all of this and enjoy talking about these wonderful characters and somebody as enthusiastic as I,
I'm.
obviously. So it's great.
It was a pleasure. I thank you for suggesting the topic in the first place, and I'm sorry it took so long to make this happen. But I've been wanting to do this for quite a while, and I'm happy we finally did get to do it. I'd like to at some point. I know a few people have asked me if I'm ever going to do episodes on Gold Key comics and the Ross novels, etc. But I'd love to have you on, since you're a Gold Key Dark Shadows comic aficionado. I'd love to have you on for that one when we do
thank
that
you.
at some point.
Wouldn't mind doing that.
Great. Oh, wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. So Nick, and we can find you again at is nick-caputo.blogspot.com. And do you have anything new coming up that you want to talk about?
No, not offhand. I just did a new blog post on Roger Hill, who was an EC Comics aficionado, studied it, and he passed. He wrote many books on comic books, but he was a big fan of the EC Comics line. And I just wanted to pay a little tribute to him, and just doing my other research work and working on a couple of projects, hopefully coming up soon.
Oh, great. Well, thank you again, Nick. And be sure to check out Nick's blog. I will put a link to that in the show notes. And folks, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time at Terror at Collinwood.
And for as long as they lived, the dark shadows never truly vanished, for there will always be Terror at Collinwood. Terror at Collinwood is a Penny Dreadful production.